Hi, my name's Helen Armstrong and I'm the CEO of Silver Cloud HR. We're an HR and payroll consultancy who focus specifically on digitising, and that often means helping our customers to choose new technology. So we want to share with you today our 12-step guide to digitising and choosing that technology using the knowledge that we've built up over the last 10 years of doing this with our customers. So step one is establishing that project team and identifying who your project sponsor is going to be. Now, the project sponsor is going to be a real key role within your project of doing this, and they're very different to the project manager. So the sponsor will be the person who's ultimately accountable, will be making the decisions, and will be really the key point of contact for your stakeholders, whilst the project manager is going to be the person that's managing the resources and making sure that the project keeps going. So be clear on who that project sponsor is, and think about who needs to be involved in the project. It wouldn't just be HR anymore. Projects have very much changed in that respect, in that HR data now touches every part of the business. So you probably want to think about involving people from within finance, from IT, maybe marketing, maybe a customer service team, but include all the people that might touch the people data and take them on that journey with you. It's quite important that you do get IT involved. Systems have changed. IT won't need to get so involved as they used to, now that systems are cloud-based, but they will need to work with you on integrations, looking at how data flows from the HR systems into other business systems, and just generally looking at data security. So do get them involved from the outset. And think about establishing your steering group. So don't wait until you've made the decision before you call the steering group to meet. Have a meeting beforehand and use that group to really set the scene of what you're going to do. And think about whether you can actually do this project on your own or whether you might need to think about getting some external support in to help you do that. And then step two is your business case. So we don't just mean a document with all the whys and this is what it's going to cost, although obviously that is what a business case is. Really be clear on why you're doing this. And with the recent pandemic, you know, the argument's already there for you. No one can argue that we don't need to digitise anymore, specifically for HR. Like, this is a really good opportunity for us to do that and to move everything online. And if you think about all the employees that may have been working at home throughout this period, they're going to have all these new technology skills that they want to bring back to work. So we need to make sure we're keeping up with what they expect. And really giving the millennials and all those guys that have been craving it for a long time what they need. So we've been handed this on a plate. This is now part of the business case, so it's done us a favour. But also think about what your pain points are and your frustrations within the business. You might not be completely clear on what they are, so what we suggest is it might be useful to hold some workshops with people, get some key stakeholders in a room and ask them what they think their pain points are. And you might get some really interesting feedback from them. I mean, typically we'll get feedback from finance teams saying, yeah, we don't get the data from HR that we need, or if we do, it's not complete or it's not accurate, and they record FTE in a different way to we record FTE, and the data doesn't flow. You'll hear all these different pain points and frustrations, and so hold these meetings and really bring those together so that you're clear on what it is that you're trying to fix. And then if you can, put a cost against it. So everything is much easier if you've got data to back yourselves up and you've got some costs behind it so you can talk numbers. And there are some calculations out there that will provide you with that data, so you can look at how many HR FTE you have and how many you should have against benchmarks. You might want to look at the cost of your onboarding process. How many person hours does it actually take to process an onboarder, and what would technology do for you? And if you can provide this information in your business case, it will not only help you to get it signed off and to have a more meaningful conversation about why you need technology, but it'll also be useful on the other side when you can look back to see if you've actually realised the benefits that you're trying to achieve. Now, coming up with these calculations isn't always easy. We have got a business case calculator that we're happy to share, so do visit our stand and you can download that for free. But data talks, it really does. So if you can do that, then please do that. And then think about what your guiding principles are. So as well as understanding why you're doing this from a pain point of view, also think about what you're trying to achieve. So years ago, it was very much about getting software that would help the HR team, would help them automate some of their processes, would just get everything online and in one place. Whereas now things have changed and it's more about the user experience, and the user now is the employee. So there's often some conflict in what you're trying to do. So with that project team and the steering group that you've established, work out between you what those guiding principles are. And they might be that the focus is to streamline HR. It might be that you need to ensure data integrity and that data flows from nowhere else but the source of truth, which is HR. It might be that it's more about the user experience and giving your workforce the technology that they're used to from other departments. But document why you're doing this project. And then those guidelines will help you throughout your project to actually make some really meaningful decisions. So when you come through the demo process, you might find that a software vendor doesn't actually meet 100% of HR's requirements, but from a look and feel and usability point of view, it's amazing. You know, look at your guiding principles. What is the focus? Is the focus for HR automation or is it for the end user experience? You can use that to help you make a decision. So that's a really useful tool also. And then step 3 is research the market and all the system types that are out there. It's really hard to start these projects if you're not really clear on what the possibilities are, and that can go one of either way. You might not realise that you can automate as much as you thought and the systems are a lot better, or actually on the flip side, we've been into customers where they are expecting the world and think they'll never have a piece of paper again or a spreadsheet and everything will be taken care of. Sadly, we're not yet at that place. I don't know if any department is, but have a look to see what's out there, and then you can get a real feel of what you're talking about when you're having those conversations with your CFO and your CEOs about why you need to do this. Obviously, don't go out and spend hours and hours doing it, but just have a look at a couple, and you can get online demos, or you can come to festivals and conferences to see demos, but do take the time to do that before you start the project if you can. There's plenty of comparison sites out there, so if you just Google, you know, HR systems and reviews, you'll get some comparison sites. There's consultancies like ours that have free selector tools. Do use those. They do work. They're not there for any other reason than to help you. So take a look, and it will help you just narrow down that long list of software vendors. If you put HR or payroll system into Google now, you'll get hundreds. And that's, you know, the benefit of cloud technology is meant we have more options when it comes to software, but obviously when you're choosing, it's a lot more difficult. So use those selector tools if you can, and keep an open mind. So we often see on LinkedIn or Facebook or any of the other social media, HR managers posting that they're looking for a system for 500 people, 5,000 people. Can anyone give them any recommendations? Well, without knowing your requirements and what sort of business you are, no one can give a sensible recommendation for a system. So be very careful when you go out and do that. And what we also find as well is you'll get the two ends of the spectrum. So you'll get the people that absolutely love a piece of software, or you might also get the people that just want to respond because they hate what they've got. And you need to be careful of those that are very negative, because sometimes people hate the software, but it's not actually for the software's fault. It's because it's been badly implemented, or they don't have the resource internally to maintain it. It's not always because of the software. So just be very careful when you go out to those social media sites and ask for feedback. Do use it, but get lots of other reference points as well, is our advice. And think about whether you want standalone or integrated systems. Now, there's a lot of talk about this, about what the best way to go is. So a standalone system is where you have separate systems for HR, payroll, recruiting, learning, and you integrate them all together ideally. Whereas integrated is where they're all within one platform, and you can get some real benefits if you're integrating HR and payroll from a data flow point of view. And there was a trend about 4 or 5 years ago where everybody wanted to go integrated, and it kind of makes sense that you're going to have everything in one place. But actually now the integration capability across all software vendors is much better. So our advice would be to keep an open mind. Don't get fixated on one or the other. See what's out there. There's benefits of both, and we're happy to talk to you about what those pros and cons are, but just keep an open mind. Sometimes you might find that you will get a better learning system if you go to a specific learning vendor. And you can imagine if you are trying to provide everything to everybody, it's not going to generally be of the same quality as if you're a specific vendor of a certain type of product. So just keep an open mind is our advice when you're doing your research, and don't discount anyone for one reason or another. Stage 4 is define the scope. Now this is really important. So with that steering group that you've established, have a meeting with them and agree what is your scope. Are you just looking for a core HR module? Do you want to include learning? Do you want to include payroll? Do you want to include recruiting? Be really clear about what it is that you're looking for. You can always have a phase 2, but really think about what it is that you're after, and then that will help you when you go out to software vendors. It's quite frustrating when you start a journey, then all of a sudden more modules start to come into play, and it can really elongate your project process, plan time. So try and be clear about that at the beginning if you can. And you know, it's fine to split things into phases. Software vendors are used to that, so have those kind of conversations with them if you can, and agree the priorities. Step 5 is to establish a project plan. Now, when you're selecting technology, it is not business as usual, it is a project. So treat it as such. Have a project manager if you can, and definitely have a project plan for it. It will really help you if you've got all the steps written down and timescales against them, and it will help you work out who you need to be in the room at which time. And not only will it help you internally, it'll also be really important for the software vendors. So you can imagine when you start this process and you make a couple of initial inquiries, you'll be inundated with salespeople trying to contact you. It's much easier for them if you can give them a document to say these are the timescales we're working to. It might not. It might reduce some of the sales calls that you get because they know where you are in your process. But it just helps with that communication and keeping everyone informed if you can. And it makes you accountable for meeting those deadlines. It's very easy to let these projects run and run and run. And you can use those to communicate with the stakeholders. So the steering group will want to know where you are against that project plan. And if you can't meet it, then just communicate why and then push all the days out. But you know, try and think about what the end point is and what date you're trying to work towards. And don't take too long. So we've seen projects that have run for months and months and months. A lot can change in that time, it really can. So if you think on the vendor side, you might have changes of the salesperson, you might have changes within your own business. There's been a lot of acquisitions lately. You might find that the software changes. So the benefit of cloud-based software is that it updates regularly. So if you leave things for years, the software that you see at the beginning is going to be very different to the software that you see at the end. So try not to take too long to do this. And also because for you internally, things might change. So you might have a change of HR director, or projects come up that you weren't expecting, or you might have an acquisition that you need to deal with. The longer it takes, the more risk there is that it will be derailed. And that's the same for any project. So try and do it as quickly as you can. There's no need to take longer than 12 weeks to choose some software. There really isn't. So that's step 5. Step 6 is about your requirements gathering. So this is often the phrase that you'll hear when you're thinking about new technology. But actually we call it information gathering. And the reason for that is that we've learned through experience that if you go into a room of stakeholders and you call it a requirements gathering session, they think they've given you their requirements, which means they then expect them back when you get the software in place. And it's not always possible to meet those needs. So we try and avoid that language. We try and have sessions which talk to people about their processes, what's working well, what's not working well, what would they like to see better. And we document all that information, and then we collate that into requirements to give to a software vendor, rather than speaking to the stakeholders themselves and calling it requirements. It just helps manage those expectations. And when you're doing that, do involve all the stakeholders. So you might not necessarily need to go out and process map every single process. Some people want to, some people don't. That's entirely up to you as a business. But make sure the right people are involved. So you definitely want finance involved in this process, payroll, IT, maybe marketing. There's often a CRM that comes into play. But really think about all those touch points, like I said earlier, and make sure you're having those conversations. And it's so that you can choose the right software, but it's also that stakeholder management, so they feel that they've been heard. And make sure you go back to them once you've chosen some software to explain to them how it's going to meet their needs. And then make sure you're clear in those meetings what your guiding principles are. So it's good for you as a project team and for you as a steering committee or steering group, whatever you want to call it. But it's also good when you're communicating to other groups of people what you're trying to achieve, just to help them manage their expectations again. So do share those. It's a really key document, a guiding principles document. Step 7 is about contacting vendors. Now, like I said, use the comparison sites or long listing selector tools through the consultancies to narrow that list down. Go out to vendors and, you know, be really clear with them on your scope and your timelines. If you've got things written down, that is so useful for them, both in terms of what you're trying to achieve and your timelines. And what we'd say is really do give them the time that they need to understand your business. It will be frustrating because there's lots of different vendors that you probably want to see in the first instance. But in order for them to show you the best of what they have, they really need to understand what your guiding principles are, what your requirements are, why you're doing this, why you're doing it now, who might be scared about what aspects of the project so that they can make sure they answer those questions. Just give them as much information as you can. We often come across customers that try to hold information back because they don't want to give away too much. And I can understand that because when you get to a negotiation point, you know, you need to make sure that you've got the best information to have a negotiation process. But, you know, you want to get the best from those software vendors. So do share as much as you can with them. And most companies, even if they don't have a procurement team now, will tend to want to do what we call an RFP process, which is where you document all your requirements and then you go out to the software vendors and they have to, in written form, document how they meet your requirements. And this is quite a useful tool. It's useful for you to help shortlist, but actually what we've found through experience is it's often a useful document to go back to if they haven't been entirely honest through the sales process. And sad to say that does happen, but it's just a useful thing to say, well, actually you did say this, but be very clear about how you write those requirements. Don't let it be too vague. And sometimes you might want to ask them, you know, is this standard functionality? Does it need to have a workaround to meet this requirement, or is it going to be something that you have to bespoke for us? Most software vendors now won't bespoke anything for you. They call it configuration, but be quite clear and think about your wording when you go out with your requirements. And just keep them informed and give them plenty of information as you're going through the process. If they return the RFP and there's gaps, do go back to them and just say, you know, you might have missed something, or, you know, is there more information you can give to us on this? Help them as much as you can is our advice. And then stage 8 is getting to the demos. Now this is a really key part of your selection process, more key than it has ever been before, because so much of the decision now is based on the usability and the end user experience that they're going to get. So you will know from seeing that piece of software put in front of you whether you like the look of it, whether you can brand it the way you want to, whether it fits in with the other business systems. And, you know, it might have all the functionality you need, but if it doesn't look great, you know, are you going to be able to get it adopted within the business? So really think about that. And make sure you talk to the vendor about what's important to you in terms of the devices that people will be using. So most customers now have a clear requirement that they need the software to work on mobile devices, and even more with this pandemic, you'll have people working on tablets and any kind of device at home. If they say they can do it, ask to see it. If they're not coming to your demo with a tablet to show you, you need to think about why. So if that's important to you as a business, ask for it. Do ask to see it and make sure that you can get evidence of how it's going to work and how it's going to look. And with that demo agenda, work with the vendor to make sure that it works for both of you. So again, we've worked with customers in the past that want to kind of trip the vendor up. So they'll give them an agenda and then say, well, we'll throw in this at the end because we want to be able to see how they cope with our questions. It might be something like, let's see if they can create a custom field on the fly to see how easy it is. You need to remember that the people that will be in the room presenting to you aren't the software developers, so don't try and catch them out. If you need a custom field built in a certain area of the system, tell them in advance and they can get people to configure that for you so that they can show you. And if they can't, then you know they can't do it. But there's no benefit from our point of view in trying to trick the software vendors whilst you're in that room. At the end of the day, you want to get the best out of them because you need to make the right decision. And the only way to make the right decision is to have all the information there available to you. And of course, when you formulate your agenda, you need to make sure that every software vendor has the same agenda because you need to be able to compare. That's really important. But don't get too fixated on the order that you see things if you can manage that. Some software vendors have their own way of presenting the software. and the order that they do it. So if that's their style, if you can accommodate that, then do. And our other really key point is to allow them time to show you what they think is important to you. So obviously you have your requirements, you know what you need to see, and there'll be the standards, you know, adding a new starter, lever, appraisals, whatever it is you're looking at. But give them time to show you their USP, because there might be something they've come up with that you haven't thought about, or we haven't thought about, that actually might change your business quite significantly, and they might be excited to show you. So give them that space to show you how they're different. And then that might help with your evaluation later on, because you are getting to see that USP. It's really quite important. And also make sure that you talk about the roadmap. If you think, you know, it's software as a service now, it's not on premise where you buy it and then it sits on your server until someone does something different with it. It'll be updating regularly every 3 to 4 months. So it's important you're buying it for what you see today, but also what they're telling you is coming in the future. Now, obviously, what they're telling you is coming in the future, you have to take with a pinch of salt because it might not come. But you know, you need to understand where they're investing, and actually that's quite important. If you can't see any evidence that they're investing in the product, you need to ask yourself why, because you want to have a system that's going to grow with you and constantly evolve. Just like the systems we use on a day-to-day basis, they constantly update without us needing to do anything. So you need to make sure that you've got the same from your HR software. And also you want to make sure that the right people are in the room at the right time. So don't talk about data security and all the techie bits with everybody. Keep that to a separate session with your IT people. Make sure that your C-level are just understanding the bits that they need to, but be really clear that you've got the right people in the right room at the right time, and have just subsequent demos with specific people if you need to. Step 9 is evaluation. So think about how you're going to evaluate it before you start. You can come up with a matrix where it might be weighted on usability, HR requirements met, references, cost. It's quite easy to put that together, but it's much easier if you do it before rather than after, and you're not engineering the answer that you want. It should become clear what the actual rating of each system is according to your matrix at the end. And then it's also useful to take back to your steering committee to say, you know, this is what we agreed was the evaluation, this is the results. Therefore, this is the system that we think we want to go for. And that will help that decision and the final yes when you need it. And then step 10 is costs. So really be clear on what those costs are before you begin those conversations. The cost structure is typically now an annual license fee, which is normally based on an employee headcount. Then there might be an additional support cost, or there might be some training costs. And then, of course, there'll be an implementation fee. Smaller vendors normally wrap up the implementation and it's more self-service. Bigger vendors will have a separate implementation plan and cost, and they might do it internally or they might outsource to a partner, but be clear on that and negotiate. And never has it been more important to negotiate. There is probably a very good deal to be had out there right now. So now is your time to get some good negotiations happening, but never take the first cost as the final result. There's always something that can be done. So make sure you do have that conversation. And then step 11, which is one I'm most passionate about, is please invest in those resources to drive forward your digital transformation. So it's one thing having a system, that's the beginning of your journey for digitisation. You need a team that understand it, that can drive it forward and have the skills to do that. The skills of someone that will manage an HR system are very different to the skills of an HR generalist. You need people that understand data, they like workflow, they like structure, they like technology, and they've got a passion for it. Even if you don't need it today, you will need it in the future because HR will become digitised. So really start thinking about how you're going to fit that skills gap. And there's actually quite a war for talent out there for those skills. So, you know, don't leave it to the last minute. And if you can have an HRIS manager or whatever you want to call it involved in that selection process, it's going to be so much more valuable because they'll understand why the system has been chosen and they'll be fully engaged in it, ready for when it's implemented and beyond. So invest in that system that you're purchasing. Otherwise you will be one of those companies that say, yeah, this system doesn't work for us, but actually it's the investment that's been put into the implementation and use of it. And then finally, step 12 is talk to others who have been in the same situation as you. So best bit of career advice I ever got was network, network, network. Definitely network with people that have done this before. not necessarily the system that they've chosen, but just the process, so that you can understand the pitfalls and avoid them. And, you know, come talk to us. We're happy to talk through our experiences. The process is very similar, regardless of what company you are. So do talk to people out there. We have got a fika at 3 o'clock today, which is just for people that are looking for new technology. So come and join that if you want to. It's no software vendors, it's just people going through the same journey, so you can all share information and help one another and do a bit of networking that way. But definitely network where you can. So that's our 12 steps for digitisation and choosing HR technology. Do come and chat to us on the stand. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope you've had a really good day.